Today we're going to be talking about 7.4 multiplication and division equations. The rules we have today are exactly the same as our lesson from yesterday. The first thing you do is identify the variable. Then you have to move the number that's keeping the variable from being alone with an inverse operation. Read to me what an inverse operation is. Good job. Okay, so addition and subtraction, what undoes each other? Addition will undo subtraction, subtraction will undo addition. Today we're going to work with multiplying and dividing. What undoes multiplication? Division. What undoes division? Multiplication. Okay, and read me the last and final step that we have to remember for today also.
What you do to one side, you must do to the other.
Okay, so we've got to be fair. If we do something to the left side of the equal sign, we have to do it to the right side of the equal sign. Our instructions ask us to solve the equation and check the solution. So remember, our steps are exactly like the same steps that we did yesterday in 7.3. 4x equals 60. What does it mean if I have a number and a variable right next to each other? What sign is technically there? Multiply, okay? So I'm multiplying those together. Identify the variable. X. What do I need to get rid of to get x all by itself?
4.
What about 4? Add 4, subtract 4. This says to multiply 4. So what's the opposite of multiply by 4? Divide by 4. The way that we're going to divide by 4 when we're doing this is the fraction bar. Divide by 4. If I divide by 4 on the left, what do I have to do to the right? Divide by 4 on the right. What is 4 divided by 4?
1.
It is not 0. 1. Anything divided by itself always equals 1. So I can technically get rid of this because I'm just multiplying by 1, and I'm left with plain old x. Because 1 times x. If I had a 1 right here, that would be fine too. 1x is the same thing as x. What is 60 divided by 4? 15 is correct. Okay, so now it asks us to check the solution. Remember, when we are checking something, this just means you're taking this original thing right here. You're going to basically be rewriting it, but we're plugging in. So right here, I have 4 times x. Did we answer what x was?
Yes.
What is x?
15.
It's 15. So instead of putting 4 times x, I'm going to actually write in there 4 times 15, since we had figured out what it was. What is 4 times 15? 60. Does 60 equal 60?
Yes.
Good job. It checked out. All right, let's see here. 2 times x equals 56. What is keeping the x from being alone?
2.
Not just 2. What operation goes with it? Times 2. What's the opposite of times 2? Divide by 2. If I divide by 2 on the left side, divide it by 2 on the right side. What happens to my 2 divided by 2? That equals what? 2 divided by 2 equals 1. Okay, so that can cross out, and I'm left with a plain old what?
28. 1. X.
Plain old x. What is 56 divided by 2?
28.
28. Who wants to help me plug it in? Go ahead.
2 times 28 equals 56. 56 equals 57.
You are correct. Great job. Problem C. If you look at this problem, there's one main difference. It has a negative number, okay? Now, negative numbers, we do it exactly the same way that we do as positive numbers. What is my variable?
A.
A. What is keeping A from being all by itself? What about it?
Multiplication.
Multiply by negative 3. What's the opposite of multiply times negative 3? By?
Negative.
Good job. Thank you for saying divide by negative 3. If I do it to the left side, got to do it to the right side.
Why do you divide by negative?
Okay, you asked why did I divide by negative 3? Because I'm trying to get rid of the multiply by negative 3. And the opposite of multiplying by negative 3 is dividing by negative 3.
So you don't use the positive.
You don't use a positive 3 because you have to divide it by itself. So like for this, if you think about 5 divided by 5 equals what? 1. 10 divided by 10 equals 1. Negative 3 divided by 3 would actually equal negative 1. I don't want my answer to be a negative 1, so that's why I have to divide by negative 3, because negative 3 divided by negative 3, since I'm dividing myself, equals 1. So that's why you have to make sure you divide by a negative 3. You have to divide by the same exact thing that you're trying to get rid of. Okay, great question. So negative 3 divided by negative 3 equals
21.
1, or 1a. And 63 divided by negative 3 equals negative 21.
It's not
3, negative 3, and times 21.
Not times 21.
Negative 21.
Negative 21.
Equals 63.
Excellent job.
So 63 equals 63.
Very good. Because remember, if you're multiplying by two negatives, it will equal a positive. Anytime you have an even number of negatives, it always equals a positive answer. Great work. Let's go to the next one. This one looks a little tricky. Is there a coefficient that goes with negative x?
No. 1.
Okay, it's 1. There's an understood 1 there because I have 1x that's there. So technically, this is negative 1x. Okay? What is keeping the x from being all alone by itself? Negative 1. Okay, so make sure you keep that negative with it. How do I get rid of this negative 1?
By dividing it.
Divide by negative 1. What you do to the left side, you have to do to the right side. What is negative 1 divided by negative 1? Just plain old 1, okay? So I can cancel that out because I'm multiplying by 1, so I'm going to get myself, which is an x. And the last thing, 15.5 divided by negative 1.
Negative 15.5.
Negative 15.5, because anytime you divide by one negative number, you have to keep the negative.
I knew that.
Okay, negative 1 times negative 15.5. That is correct. And it checked out. Problem E. X over 6 equals 12. Whenever you have something that looks like that, x over 6,
Division.
that is division.
So you gotta do multiplication.
I want to get x by itself. How do I get rid of that divide by 6?
Multiply.
I have to multiply by
6.
6, all right? So I'm just going to put a little right here in parentheses, multiply by 6, multiply by 6. All right, if I have a 6 on top of a 6, what does that equal, Kayla? A 1. So that can cross out, and on the left side, I'm left with? On the left side.
72. Wait, no. Yeah.
Okay, the right side is 72, the left side is
X.
x. X equals 72. Go ahead and check it for me, plug it back in. Remember, all you're doing is you're rewriting this exact original problem, but instead of doing x over 6, what are you going to plug in?
72 over 6 equals 12. 12 equals 12.
You are correct. I checked out. Okay, the next one. I want b by itself. What is keeping b from being by itself?
12.
What about the 12?
Divide.
Divide by 12. So what's the opposite of divide by 12?
Multiply.
Multiply by 12. If I do it to one side, I've got to do it to the other. So this over here cancels out. I'm left with B equals
168.
168. Okay, then all you have to do is plug it back in. What is 168 divided by 12? 14, and 14 does equal 14. So that's correct. Good job, most of you figuring that out on your own. Nice work. We want to get the x by itself on problem G. What is keeping x from being alone? Divide by negative 5.5. What's the opposite of dividing by negative 5.5? Multiplying by negative 5.5. What I do to the left side, I must do to the right side. Negative 5.5 over negative 5.5 equals 1. So I am left with only having an x on the left side. What is negative 36 times negative 5.5? 198. When you have two negatives multiplied by, when you have a negative multiplied by a negative and there are two negatives there, it will always equal a positive. Okay, once you plug that back in, 198 divided by negative 5.5, you can use your calculators. When you do that, what do you get? Negative 36, and that does equal negative 36, so you know it checked out. Once again, identify the variable. What is it? Z. Let's get Z by itself. What is keeping Z from being by itself?
Divide by 3.
Thank you for saying divide by 3. What's the opposite of divide by 3? Multiply by 3. Okay, that's using the inverse operation. I do to one side, I got to do it to the other. On the right-hand side, I've got 3 over 3. What is 3 divided by 3?
X.
1, which leaves only Z. And your answer is going to be 3 times 0.4, which is 1.2. Okay, go ahead and check it on your own for me.
0.4 equals 1.2 over 3, and 0.4 equals 0.
Good job. All right, for this next one, there's a special note that I want you to write down in your red pen. If the number you need to move is a fraction, multiply by the reciprocal. So the first problem says 3/4 y. What sign does that mean if the number is directly next to the variable? Multiply. So I am multiplying times 3/4 and a y. If you remember, do you guys remember keep, flip, change? Okay, so this is that idea, but the idea of keep, flip, change is you basically just need to use the reciprocal. Okay, so instead of making you keep one, flip one, change the sign, we are just going to multiply by the reciprocal. So what is the reciprocal of 3/4? 4 over 3. So I'm going to multiply this side times 4 over 3. If I do that to the left side, what do I have to do to the right side? Multiply times the same thing, 4 over 3. 4/3 times 3/4. What does that equal? 1. Okay, if you think about it, the 4 could turn into a 1, this 4 could turn into a 1, the 3's turn into 1's. Basically, the entire thing can get canceled out because it just equals a 1. So I have right here 1y, but since that 1 is understood, you don't need to put the 1. So y equals, now I've got 12 times 4/3. Once again, you're allowed to use your calculators, or real simply, you could go like this. That turns into a 1, this turns into a 4, and what is 4 times 4? 16. Okay? Okay, so then basically if you're going to be checking it, 3/4 times 16 equals 12. When you plug that in your calculator, you will see that 12 does equal 12. Let's look at the next one. I want you to attach that negative to a number, okay? It doesn't matter to me if you do -3 or if you do -10. For me, I'm going to go ahead and do negative 3 over 10, but I do want it to be attached. Remember, if you have a fraction, my goal right now is to get rid of negative 3 over 10. I have to multiply by the what? The reciprocal. So if I did negative 3 over 10, what is the reciprocal of negative 3 over 10?
Over negative 3.
10 over negative 3. All you're doing is switching it. If I do 10 over negative 3 on that side, I must switch and do 10 over negative 3 on this side. Now, if you remember, 10 over negative 3 times negative 3 over 10 equals what? 1. This cancels out. When you multiply by a reciprocal, it equals 1. So I have, once again, 1n, but I don't need to put my n there. Now we need to figure out what negative 5 times 10 over negative 3 would be. So we're trying to figure out how to multiply this together. Let's multiply my numerators here. What is negative 5 times 10?
Negative 50.
Negative 50, okay? Over a negative 3. If I have two negatives, what does that equal? A positive. So my answer is going to be it's going to be 50 over 3. Okay, as you know, there is a quiz on Monday, so you're going to have to remember how to do this. I want you to go ahead and write this down for me, please. Solve and check. This is the exact kind of problem that we did yesterday. In order to get x by itself, what do I have to get rid of?
6.3.
6.3. How do I get rid of plus 6.3?
You make it a negative 6.3.
Minus 6.3 on both sides.
Both sides.
This cancels out. I'm left with x. What does x equal?
3.1.
3.1. You check it.
6.3 plus 3.1 equals 9.4.
And 3.1 equals 3.1. Check.
Now put 4. Now put 14 more.
That is correct. Okay? Please make sure you're reviewing and studying for this stuff. That is what you need to know from our lesson today.